Okay, welcome to the Monday morning, April 1st, 2019 meeting of SIG Apps. There are only a few items to talk about today, and then we're going to have an overview of mentoring from Paris, who is on the call. So I'm going to paste the meeting minutes into the chat. And if we'd like to start with, this actually has Paris talking first, but we only have a couple of things in the workloads. And I want to talk about those first, just because it should be relatively fast. We can have more discussion after Paris does the mentoring, but in case anyone just wanted to be able to drop off real quick after we did that, I'm just gonna give a brief one. So two things, the Max unavailable for stateful set merge, but it probably still needs a bit of work to go to implementable, but it's approved and merged. And then there's a kept open for taking pod disruption budget to GA. I'd have some feedback on it. I think we're mostly there, but there are a couple of things that are a little bit still open. So one is we have a scale sub resource now, and kind of an open question is, and this is feedback I'll leave on the KEP too, do we want the pod disruption budget to be able to interact with an arbitrary scale sub resource so that you can apply pod disruption budgets to CRDs, for instance, right? So like if I have my clustered app and my clustered app implements a custom scale sub resource, I'd like to be able to probably apply a disruption budget to that. Then the other thing is the minute available percentage was kind of, so we added max unavailable to pod disruption budget because it was more clear exactly what you'd be expressing there. And the intention was to remove min available, but it's not really clear to me that people don't still find that feature useful. So it'd be good to get feedback from people on whether, you know, removing min available is something we should do, or we should just keep the semantics where you can specify either. And yeah, that was all I had. So Paris, are you here?
I am indeed.
Okay, if you'd like to take over and.
Yeah, hold on one sec. I'm actually copying the deck that I created onto your agenda right now. Let's see, here we go. And then I'm also gonna share my screen too. Thanks for having me. All right. So since this is a small group, I actually think this is even better for me personally, because I really want to kind of start a discussion with very large SIGs, especially those who have a lot of sub-projects or have a lot of owners files, et cetera, as we start talking about things like succession planning and how you're helping folks with burnout and stuff like that. So first things first, thanks again for having me. This is awesome. Is everyone here for the most part associated with an owner's file in some respects on this call right now? I mean, Ken, obviously, I know you are. And then obviously, I know Salty is as well for CLI and stuff like that. Are the rest of the callers just contributors or reviewers, approvers? What's the makeup of this call right now?
Tomas and MyJack are definitely in some owners files unless they snuck and removed themselves.
Okay, cool. All right. Oh, hold on. Let me actually get my chat up too so I can see that. Okay, cool. All right. So like I said, I just want to get a sense of like what acronyms I'm allowed to use and stuff like that, because obviously everybody here knows there's a lot. So what I told architecture and what I've told several other SIGs is that in order for us to do mentoring initiatives that matter, meaning not one-on-one initiatives. And I think that one-on-one initiatives in cases like ours, because we're huge, don't necessarily scale or work. Because I mean, as you know, there's only so many owners file folks to go around, and we have 26,000 contributors. It just doesn't line up, and or even anybody has necessarily time to do so. And we actually just did a contributor experience survey late last year, and most of the responses were overwhelmingly, I just don't have time to mentor. So we do have tons of things that we can do though to feed the gaps and things like that in order to move people throughout these, I call them career ladders, but you know, it's open source ladders, decision-making ladders, things like that. But in order to do so, we have to do some house cleaning. So this is the part where I say, like, we have to get our house in order. I don't know if anybody's ever heard that from me or other people. But in order to do so, there's a couple things that need to happen. The use of labels. No, this does not need to be clean and perfect, but something for contributors, even current contributors. I mean, current contributors look for labels as well, that current contributors and new contributors can pick up, work that can pick up and work that can be scoped enough to where you can help them. So we have a good first issue label now, and we also have help wanted. And then this is just getting, again, good issue triage, hygiene and things like that, so that like when we're starting to advertise and things along those lines for certain sub projects that need work and need help, that it's not going to just be a free-for-all. Another piece is cleaning up and auditing your owner's files, figuring out what that means for you exactly, coming up with like an inactive strategy, an emeritus strategy, things along those lines, making sure that you're communicating to your contributors that you have right now in your owner's files that it's okay if they want to communicate that they're going to be inactive for a certain period of time, just kind of opening up the lines of communication there. And then also potentially making your own contributing markdown files. Obviously, we have a contributor guide one that's in a community repo that covers most things. But I know that some of the SIG Apps projects do have their own contributing markdown file. If you're listening right now and you're in a sub-project that does not have one, think about it. Think about how your on-ramps can help with this, just by being explicit as to what folks need in order to start contributing. And I say need, I mean like knowledge. Like Bazel, for instance. Do people need Bazel in order to be successful within this sub-project, for example? And again, that's just an example. That's not saying that they do. And then also we're going to go into creating roles in a second. This is, I consider this a part of the house cleaning, but this is a really cool way to scope out work. And like I said, I'll talk about that in a second. And then of course, be overly communicative. Start now. And I say that by being explicit with what you're looking for. So if folks on here know that they have certain work that needs to be done or a KEP that needs to be done, advertise it on Kubernetes Dev. Say, hey, we're looking for people to help us out with this thing. There's also a role board on discuss.kubernetes.io. Please be explicit there. That has SEO, that's catching, so when people are searching for the web, that's not behind a firewall. So that's just stuff that I've noticed that other parts of the project do extremely well and get a lot of feedback from it. For instance, I just saw Phil Whitrock do one recently for user group formation documentation, some more governance work. And he was super explicit and had about 5 people reach out to him, and now he's forming a team around this little project. So just be explicit and ask on mailing lists, and not just necessarily SIG Apps, but all of the mailing lists and the communication stuff that we use within the project. All right. So are there any roles currently within SIG Apps? outside of, the standard owner's file roles?
No.
Okay. Do you
Well, so
foresee?
co-chair.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's like the chairs and stuff, but I mean, in terms of like the workloads API, no.
Okay. Well, so I'm sure y'all are doing a ton of different, playing a lot of different hats, right? Like I know for me, like I'm co-chair and contributor experience, and I feel like I play a lot of different roles, like all of the glue that the project doesn't necessarily have. So I mean, this could be like triage, this could be onboarding new contributors, this could be like a project manager, this could be whatever. So what I'm doing is I'm taking all of those things that I do and trying to scale that and create roles out of them, and it's working out really, really well. So like right now we're building a triage team. So like we'll have a triage captain, a PR wrangler, and then they'll rotate, they'll have shadows. It's very similar to the release team. We're creating role books. And this is really a good way to start mentoring, because they're going to have shadows. And we've seen with the release team that the way that they're mentoring, it's just natural based on roles and the roles description that we're defining for that. Excuse me one second. I'm sorry. Um, and then I wanted to bring up the new contributor ambassador team, because we do have new contributors that like join SIG meetings and stuff. I mean, I know SIG Apps has that, you all have that a lot. Why not have like a dedicated monthly thing? And you can advertise it on the top of your agenda that says like, hey, new contributors, come to this call. And then you'll have someone that's, experienced, doesn't necessarily need to be a maintainer, but somebody that is also trying to find ways to help out with the project. And then like sort of they could sit there and help scope out work. They could do like live issue triage. They could really just dig into the project in ways that they need to be like kind of handheld, that we don't necessarily have other avenues for. And this is something that we're starting to kick up in a lot of other groups, and we haven't necessarily gone forward with it, so I don't have any results to share. But this could be something, like I said, that apps could take advantage of as well. And then like test liaison teams, so like CLI is doing like test manager and stuff like that. Again, think about roles that could be beneficial to apps where either like you currently have gaps, or like you could do you could make like a whole team out of it, like a release team, for instance. Like in contributor experience, we're also doing like an events team. So so for the contributor summits, like what we have all these functions and then shadows. Think about ways like that. And the reason why I think this is like the best form of mentoring is because we have seen that it works with the release team, and I've seen it work in other areas because they're well scoped defined roles, and it's not very ambiguous, like, hey, climb up this ladder to be an approver, when that's really kind of built on trust. And what we're trying to do here is make sure that we trust these folks. And one way to do that is by them seeing that they have these roles available, and like by seeing them, like watching them grow into these roles. Questions about roles? Cool. Another thing that we found in contributor experience and just through my travels in open source is that we need to start generating more contributor content that's not necessarily documentation inside of a community folder. And what this means exactly, I mean, it can mean anything where we're talking like this about a subject and we are recording it, live streaming it. People are consuming content in all kinds of ways these days. I guarantee you, everybody that's on the line right now gets their content in or prefers content in some way that's not like the other. And this is really helpful because, and I like to talk about this because this takes away a lot of time burdens from normal one-on-one mentoring, because you're giving people what they need and you're doing it in a way where you're already on the thing anyway. So like, for instance, if you're doing a code review right now or tonight, like, and you're just sitting there and you're just chilling, like, why not record you and why not talk about it? And then you're going to go through step by step and teach someone what's in your brain and your methodology on how you do a code review. This is so popular on Twitch right now. I don't know if anybody's seen these, but like some people with the Apache project do them, and it's really, really super cool. And we've done Meet Our Contributors, which is a once a month, like sort of upstream mentoring initiative. Hold on, actually, I think I have, yeah, here it is. So some of you have actually been on here. Some of you have not. Please come on as a mentor if you have not. But this is just a once a month initiative where we get six of us on from various different parts of the upstream project, and we answer questions from people who are in Slack in a Meet Our Contributors channel right here. So like the questions come live, and it could be like, what's a CAP? I have no idea why my test is flaking. What the heck is SIG Apps? Why do I care? Like anything above the sun, right? And we even do code-based tours. So SIG Apps could come and give like some kind of code-based tour. And look, this already has 900 views, and we don't advertise this anywhere outside of contributor networks. So from just like a time perspective alone, we feel like this is pretty worthwhile and something that SIG Apps could definitely take advantage of with like the many facets that is SIG Apps. So especially like workloads API, that would be super dope for you all to do like live code reviews, stuff like that. So like, you can do this a couple of different ways. Like, so you can employ contributor experience to help you. We can come in and either live stream it. We could record it for you, whatever. Or your chairs can just feel empowered to do it themselves. You also have host keys that you can give out to other people to like record Zooms yourself and then put it on your YouTube playlist. And then the cool part is we can link this stuff from your contributing Markdown files. So this is more ways to get other people involved in your project. And again, even current contributors, this is not just necessarily new contributors, people who are contributing in other facets of the project that might be able to help you all get through certain parts of any challenges that you're having. And then also from a content perspective, I did want to mention contributor summits. And make sure that we're taking advantage of them to their highest extent. So if there are parts to SIG Apps that either need to have a birds of a feather or a workshop or some kind of training session, like let's do it. Contributor experience is all ears. And I know for Barcelona, I do want to plug Barcelona. We have some space for SIGs to do face-to-face meetings for like roughly 30 people. And this would be just your contributors. This would be obviously outside of the intro and the deep dive. But if anybody is, interested in that kind of thing to where it would just be a close-knit group of your contributors that would be working on a problem, let me know and we can get you the space for that. We have about 7 SIGs right now that are going to take advantage of that space for contributor only kind of meetings. Questions about generating content that's not documentation, or even why that's helpful. I'm actually like, just to like kind of like give a side note, I'm a part of this a professor's research study at Oregon State University. She's doing some open source work for growing contributors. And one of the main things that keeps coming up is just the lack of documentation, very similar to like, consumers and users, and just the lack of how to get into the next rung. So it's very important that we think about ways on how to do that. So I'm almost done, and then y'all can finish up the meeting and we can have like a discussion too, because I want to ask you some questions. Another thing I wanted to introduce to y'all is group mentoring. This is not something that usually happens in open source. This is definitely a concept that might be new to many of you. But this is something that we've tested and something that also Cluster Lifecycle does at like a little bit more of an informal basis. But the important things to take away here is that there's power in peer mentoring. Like, this burden of mentoring doesn't need to necessarily be on just maintainers. You can get a group of people together, and we have the infrastructure to do it. We've set up the community infrastructure around this, but a group of people would get together in a private environment, about 10 people with 3 mentors. So that's like a 3 it's like a 3 to 3-ish ratio, or a 1 to 3 ratio, 1 to 3 ratio. I apologize. But everybody's together in this shared communication space, working on shared goals. And that shared goal would be to take somebody from, like, say, reviewer to approver. And they're working based off of the community membership guidelines. And let me see, I think I have the community membership guidelines up? I don't, but I'm going to get to them right now. Community membership. Yes, here we go. So these groups are formed around these goals. Like, we already have these goals right now. And this, again, is around how we're creating trust and how we're moving up the ladder based on these trust roles. So, like, for instance, reviewer, we've said, like, this person should be a member for at least 3 months, things like that. But these things are at least steps in order to gain folks' trust. In order to make sure that, we think that they're going to maintain the code, that they're going to be helpful in the community, that they review code, and that they're looking out for the right things, etc. But we can set these groups up. So, like, all we have to do is advertise to your mailing list, say, hey, we need more approvers, and especially in this certain area. And we're looking for a group of people who are currently reviewers, and they all want to be approvers, and then get everybody together and then determine that in a 3-month time period that you're going to give them feedback based off the reviews that they do, and also give them guidance. And again, this is a 1 to 3 ratio. And then at the end of that 3 months, then you can graduate folks into owner's files in that sort of a semi-structured environment that isn't so ambiguous like current open source standards are. Hold on. And does anybody have any questions about group mentoring? I'm resharing my screen here, because this is sort of a new kind of concept. I mean, it's not necessarily new as far as, like, I'm sure everybody at some point has been a part of some group where you've all learned together. But this would be, in a different kind of a way of getting, I guess, contributors into certain rungs of a ladder, if you will. So anyway, if you have any questions about that, I'm here. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is something that I've been saying this whole entire time, which is just to be explicit and to ask people, because it seems to be just a reoccurring theme that I hear out and about, is that people just don't understand necessarily how to get to that level, or how to be an approver, how to be a reviewer. Why don't you can pin the community membership document to your meeting notes. You can talk about on your meeting, say, hey, we're looking for more approvers in this area. You can talk about it on the Kubernetes dev mailing list with 4,000 people. You can talk about it in the Kubernetes blog. Tell a story about how you're building something and that you're willing to mentor people in a certain way. And then, of course, ask. There's nothing like a survey. So, like, the next time y'all do a survey, maybe do like a mini contributor survey where you ask them what are some of, like, the hardest parts about contributing. Like, what topics do they struggle with? Do they understand what it means to be a good code reviewer for a certain sub-project? You'll be surprised with the results, I think. But that's pretty much it for me. And I think that these things are just super required in order for us to not necessarily have that standard one-on-one peer, peer mentoring, where it's like super ambiguous and a lot of time suck as far as your time is concerned. And these are ways that we can scale. But that's it for me.
Thanks, Paris.
Yeah.
Okay. That's actually, I think, all we had. Do we have any questions for Paris, or do we want to have any conversations around mentoring or steps to going forward?
Are there any parts of the project? I mean, I say project, I mean SIG Apps. Are there any parts to SIG Apps that you feel need attention? Like, do you feel like you need do you feel like there's approvers that you need? Do you feel like the owners file people that you have now are currently actively engaging and getting other people in owners files? Talk to me about that stuff.
Well, so there's some things we need to do. Like, we have some housekeeping we need to take care of there. Like, for instance, I think KSON is still listed on a project as a project on SIG Apps. And as far as I know, Brian and the Heptio/VMware guys are killing that project altogether. So we need to clean that up. I think Helm is now, I think we cleaned our stuff up with Helm, respect to that being a top level. For the owners files and SIG Apps, we should probably spread our approvers around a little bit more. We could build more reviewers. I guess it's not something we've been trying to manage actively in terms of growing contributorship. The thing about it is, like, with the APIs going V1 about a year ago, and with SIG architecture encouraging heavily new contributions to be developed out of tree using CRDs, there's a limited amount of activity relative to the early days of the project, when it was, you can code and test something pretty fast in tree and just get it shipped. With the increase in stability, the velocity and cadence of new features is much slower. And then with the KEP process, that also slows things down a little bit. I think the way I've been trying to review or help grow contributorship is by people who actually, so it's open source, right? People generally contribute to open source because they have a need to do something that the software doesn't do. And when they find that need, I try to help them open up a KEP and get the KEP looked at, get the KEP shepherd forward, act as an approver for it, or find someone else to collaborate with other SIGs where it's necessary. And then kind of help them drive the process of getting the KEP through and making the contribution. And
what if you did that? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
To me, that's how you grow contributorship, right? Like, if you have to have a need, you have to have an idea, express that idea, and figure out how you're going to get it into the repository and into the tree. And then, we'll help you try to make that happen, assuming that, the idea that you've got, we feel like is generally useful, and we have a, broad agreement that this is something we should put in tree.
What if you did that as like a role? Like, what if you had someone like either bi-weekly or once a month that would have like a KEP AMA, like how to get your KEP into SIG Apps, or something like along those lines, to where you could kind of scale that, and then that would help save like time and energy.
Well, I mean, we just did a review of the new KEP process, or the KEP process as it's been evolving. We've done a couple of reviews of the KEP process. And then every week when we do the workloads, every week or bi-weekly, when we do the workloads discussion for the ongoing KEPs that affect the workloads API, we discuss them here, current status of them, and then, ask for people to take a look to make sure that the community is putting eyes, and not just the approvers are putting eyes on what's going to go into tree.
Yeah. You could also, like, what about building some triage teams?
I mean, that makes sense. Our triage hasn't been that bad, though. Our tests are mostly passing. We were once like one of the most flaky, and now we're one of the least flaky. Again, because of the cadence of contributions, we're not really, it's not as, crazy as it once was. If people want to be test maintainers, though, I mean, like, I'm more than happy to get more people to spread that burden out a little bit more.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking too, like, it might not be bad to do the triage team now that it's not that now that it's not that crazy. And then also think about the fact that these folks are also going to get a purview into other aspects of the project, or again, SIG apps. When I say project, SIG apps. Um, and then might be able to start contributing heavier there too. So that's another thing, like with the release team anyway, it's like giving people a purview into aspects of the project, and then they usually go and start contributing into like one area further kind of thing. So like it's just giving people like an onboarding experience essentially, instead of just like read the docs and pick up a label. That's kind of how I'm trying to like look at this from like an organizational perspective, is like, how can we organize the project in ways where like mentorship just comes naturally. And it's not just like, artificial, right? Just like what you're doing with like, explaining KEBs to people, but like, how can we maybe do that like on a cadence? Or maybe could we do that as like, could we do that from a project perspective? Like, should we do like a KEPS AMA every 2 weeks? Think about stuff like that. Like, I'm super happy to talk about like how we could do project wide stuff too. Like if you think like, hey, this is a problem for apps and it's probably a problem for others, tell me and we can think about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just don't, there's not, KEPs are new enough that I think the people who are actively involved with the project are familiar with them. I feel like it's like Pinterest offered a new KEP recently. And like, they're like, what are these things? Like, if someone who's just using the software for the first time, or who's using the software but hasn't contributed to it, decides they want to make a contribution, having a low touch onboarding is a good thing. I don't know how to do that right now or have any useful feedback to it.
Yep. And if there is ever the case where it's like, hey, this company wants to start contributing, I'm unsure and I don't have the time, you can always push them to contributor experience too. There's plenty of us that will actually do like one-on-one support, especially for companies who are onboarding like, more than one engineer to do something upstream. So we're here for that as well too. But that's it for me. Like I said, it would be cool to figure out from your contributor base, like what areas they might want to grow in. So just by asking, so just like sending an email that says like, hey, has anybody here ever wanted to be a reviewer or an approver? Like if so, speak now, forever hold your peace, kind of an email. And like I said, you'll be surprised. I bet you there's quite a few people that will step up, and we can start like either forming groups around that, or we can start delivering content in areas that they might need it. But I'm happy to help in any way. If you have an idea, let me know, and you can catch me on Slack.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to add is there is that KEP I just mentioned from Pinterest. They opened it against SIG apps, and if people want to take a look, I added that to the workloads discussion topics as well. It's kind of like a lower touch version of pod replacement. So we don't really have a way in Kubelet right now of doing things like modifying the shape of a container in terms of resource limits and requests without actually doing a full restart of the pod. The only thing we can do right now that I'm aware of in place is patch the image of a container, and that'll work. So it seems like they want to propose that we actually start implementing that. And I'd like to get other people's feedback on that. I updated the doc with that KEP. Do we have any other discussion topics? Okay, do we want to get 20 minutes back? I'm going to take that as an affirmative. All right, guys, see y'all next week, and have a good week.
Thanks, bye.